Hello there and welcome to Marketing Talk. Thank you so much for coming along. Great to see everyone joining. Please do feel free to introduce yourself and say hello in the chat. Would be great to hear who's with us today. And whether this is your first time joining a Marketing Talk event with us or if you've been to one of our previous talks, huge thanks for choosing your Thursday afternoon, choosing to spend your Thursday afternoon with us on this very sunny day. We've got two very exciting speakers today, both from agency Fox&Bear, who we're really looking forward to introducing shortly. Quick one, just by way of introduction. So my name is Catherine. I've been working with the team at Silicon Brighton for about a year now, actually, to bring Marketing Talk events and a bit of a marketing community to life. So far, all virtual, but we hope to be getting out in the world and into the Brighton community this summer, hopefully too. I'll be hosting the event today. A couple of bits just for you to be aware of. The session is being recorded so that we can share it afterwards. So if you want to watch it back or you want to share it with someone or you need to dip out, it will be available on the Silicon Brighton Hub and various LinkedIn after the event. At any point during any of the talks today, please do use the Q&A function within Zoom at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions that you may have along the way. We've got plenty of time carved out to do Q&A at the end of both talks, so please don't be shy. So a little bit more about what Marketing Talk is all about. So as I mentioned, we've been running these events for nearly a year now and started Marketing Talk as a way to bring together marketers from all backgrounds, all industries and all stages of your career who are looking to take their skills to the next level. And we try and bring you really great speakers who will share their advice and insights, not just on specific marketing strategies, but also some of the personal skills that you need within your marketing career. So we've had ones on hiring strategies and skills building and confidence and public speaking and all of that sort of thing, as well as some specific marketing strategies like content marketing and SEO. And today we're talking all about branding. In the future, we hope to expand the community aspects of Marketing Talk too. As I mentioned, hopefully some in-person events one day. And we've been doing a few more sort of breakout style events too, so keep an eye out for them. Everyone who comes along is invited to speak at one of these events. We do them every 6 weeks to every couple of months. So if you want to come along and speak, get that first experience of public speaking under your belt, please do let me know. Give me a shout on LinkedIn or send me a message during the event today. Would really love to hear from you. Now, Silicon Brighton also have a fantastic community hub, which I mentioned earlier, where we can keep the discussion going after the event too. So we'll tell you a little bit more about that shortly. Firstly, the agenda for today. So just running through a bit of an intro now, and we're going to hear from Steve, who runs Silicon Brighton, a bit more about what they're all about and different ways that you may want to get involved. And then we've got two speakers. So we've got our keynote from Lisa Seymour, followed by a Q&A, which is all about the language of brand, followed by a fireside chat with James Dempster, which is all about agency, teams, and a little bit about ancient Greeks too. All will be revealed. Plenty of time for Q&A after that as well. So please do keep the questions coming. And then we'll close up with a little bit more about Silicon Brighton and any final thoughts. So for now, I'd like to introduce Steve Rackley from Silicon Brighton, who's going to tell us a little bit more about the work that they do over there. Hey, Steve.
Thanks, Catherine. That video feels like it gets longer and longer every time we play it. Imagine how much extra content we could fit if we shorten that down. I think we might do that next time. Yeah, just following on from Catherine, I want to add a massive thanks to everyone for joining today. All of us at Silicon Brighton get so excited every time Marketing Talk comes around. From a standing start last year, it's developed into one of Brighton's most relevant meetups. It's an absolute testament to what can be achieved when you bring together great people with a common interest. And Lisa, James, so absolutely awesome for you to come along and provide us with so much of your time. So massive thank you. If it's okay, I'm just going to provide a bit of background to those of you that are new to Silicon Brighton. We are a community-led initiative to support digital growth across the South Coast. So we began only back in late 2019, so it feels like an absolute lifetime ago, but not long at all, by working with local groups to help raise their profile and provide individuals, just like everyone here, with free opportunities for networking, training, upskilling and development. The aim being to try and help everyone benefit through the sharing of expertise and the forming of new connections and partnerships. To date, we have run and supported over 90 events and given a platform to hundreds of speakers to share their knowledge. And yeah, I hope everyone enjoys today's session. I'd just like to say we're really keen to hear from anyone watching who would like to explore how they can contribute to Silicon Brighton. That could be speaking at an event, that could be helping with a workshop, or that could even be starting your own meetup group. So just head along to our website, siliconbrighton.com, and from there you can join our community hub. You can reach out to me, Kirsty, Kieran, any of the team. And yeah, that's enough from me. Thanks again, Catherine. Back to you.
Thank you very much. All right, great. So let's get into our first speaker then. So I'd like to introduce Lisa, who joins us as Business Development Director at Fox&Bear, who's going to be sharing our keynote talk today, which is all about the language of brand. A little bit more about Lisa. So Lisa works for Fox&Bear, as I mentioned, which is an award-winning agency for end-to-end storytelling. She has 15 years of experience across multiple marketing, media formats, online and offline. And today she's going to be sharing some really tangible and actionable brand strategy insights that you can take forward into your role, regardless of your industry or sector. So big hello, Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to your talk.
Thank you. I will share my screen, bear with me.
Great.
Share, 1 second. Hello everyone, it's nice to see you. Thanks for joining today. Here we go, can everyone see that? I think they can. So today I'm going to talk about the language of brand, and that's my take on it via my experience that I've had in all types of marketing. So we're going to learn a little bit about me. I promise that won't go on for too long. It's relatively quick and not too much to say. Then we're going to hear my take on the history of brand and where I think it's sort of all started. My top tips for understanding and stretching brand guidelines, and some takeaways that are actionable for you. So a little bit about me. So I'm a self-confessed crazy pug lady. I've got 2 pugs. This one here is called Twiggy, and they keep me going on a day-to-day basis. Don't be fooled by the cute face, because she's absolutely bonkers. I studied behavioural psychology at university, which really ignited my love for human beings, really, and working out what makes them make certain decisions and understanding buying patterns and all sorts of other things that I did on a 3-year degree course. I started my career in print, but from then, so back in 2004, which is when I started, maybe a bit earlier, I've covered everything from print right the way up to out-of-home advertising, and have been on teams that have worked on backdrops that are now displayed at Gatwick Airport. I've run creative and development teams since about 2005 and have seen everything from client briefs and everything in between. And I'm currently, new job title, only happened yesterday, Head of Brand Development at Fox&Bear. So where did it all start? Well, if you think about cave drawings on walls back in prehistoric times, they told stories using a series of images, shapes and styles. It was the simplest form that translates to modern brand. It's actually referred to now by some experts as a rudimentary form of branding or marketing. Essentially, they were simply asking their audience or family or members to follow their story. So they told stories, it communicated a message, and their styles were unique and consistent with their certain groups. Fast forward a few millennia, herds of cattle were moving across the plains of Chicago, and it was easy to distinguish which ranch they belonged to by the initial or mark that was scorched onto their hide. A few thousand miles away in Wales, sheep farmers were using coloured dye to label their flock. A single spot of colour on the animal's fleece made them recognisable. These measures were initially used to protect or locate strayed or wandered off animals that may find themselves on rival farmland, and actually to protect them from being stolen. But by using a simple mark, shape or colour to identify the animals, through consistent use of both of these, the farmer and the rancher have actually found themselves to become recognisable. Their colour or mark became synonymous with the service, quality and reputation. It protected their property, it built recognition, it delivered a service and quality and reputation. Perception of the word brand itself has evolved, but we're still drawing on walls, as demonstrated perfectly here by the recent Guardian campaign. It's no longer just a shape or colour, it's about connecting, storytelling and relevance. Our audiences are bigger, more complex, and so are our brands. The story they need to tell needs to be concise. Brands need to make statements to convey a message, make a visceral connection, and make sure their audiences understand their points. Can a simple shape or colour really do that alone? I think that's probably a bit of a tall order. So we need to make sure that the brands we work with are able to evolve. The ever-shifting needs of brand audiences mean marketeers like us need to aid that evolution. And much like Darwin's theory, these steps are small and incremental. Global brands with strong visceral connections weren't born overnight, let's face it. They also didn't sit still. They look for continued improvement and continued connection. It's easy to forget where it all started, and that brands like Apple didn't start off as a slick lifestyle brand we all now couldn't live without. I can't imagine opening a box with my new iPhone in it with Sir Isaac Newton sitting under a tree, for example. So my top tips for navigating these changes do start with the brand guidelines, how we use them, how we understand them, but most importantly, how we grow them. Read them before you start. It sounds obvious, but the complexity of some brand guidelines means it's really good practice to spend time digesting them. Before you start any new project, work with any new client, or start in a new role, make sure you've read them cover to cover. I make sure I've gone through the brand guidelines from start to finish, and then I have a clear understanding of the look, feel of the existing brand. Importantly, I even read the parts that aren't relevant to what I'm doing. It gives me insight into the brand. So read the tone of voice guide if you're only working with the visuals, and vice versa. It's important wherever your role fits into the project, whether that be designer, developer, photographer, or paid media expert, that you understand the brand as a whole. Understanding their story is of paramount importance. I find that helps us create synergy with the client and keeps us all on the same page. At this point, I spend time making notes, particularly on what the client's brief says and how this translates to guidelines or not. In some cases, the assets just aren't there, and this needs to be considered at the beginning. A simple example of this are people-centric brands that have no pictures of people, none on their websites, none in their assets. I see this a lot with clients. They're so focused on their product, they forget how their product makes their clients feel. You rarely see Apple talk about how their tech works. It just does. We all want it. And that's partly because of the amazing buying journey they've created. It's as much about the box and the experience of opening it as it is about the product. Ask questions. The most important thing is that if you don't understand something, and you probably won't, ask. Brand guidelines can range from non-existent to incredibly technical. So raise any questions you have as soon as possible, rather than when you're midway through a project. Even experienced marketers and designers need guidance. There are no stupid questions when it comes to guidelines. I've seen some placement guidelines that a mathematical genius would struggle with, so never be afraid to get clarity. Personally, I like to have my questions prepped for our onboarding or briefing sessions. This is a great opportunity for you to learn about the client's business or product and ask about anything within the guidelines that doesn't fit with their overall desired outcome. Understand where your role fits. Guidelines are often handed over without any further explanation. This means they're open to interpretation. If you work in a team, I recommend spending a few minutes each discussing your personal interpretation out loud. If the guidelines are only very small and only include a logo, colours and fonts, then discuss what's missing for your project. This discussion will help brainstorming ideas too. And if you're freelance or work alone, I find mood boards a really useful exercise, even if you're not showing anyone. It takes your ideas out of your head and makes them tangible. As the word guideline suggests, these are not hard and fast set rules. So I'm not suggesting that you go back to work and tell your boss or your clients you're tearing up their beloved brand guidelines, but I do believe we should be able to challenge them. So the brands we work with don't stagnate or disconnect with their audience. Collaborate. I like to get the wider team's opinion. From creative engagement to PR, I like to understand where my ideas translate to their part of the marketing process. There's no point me working on a campaign that is then too time or cost consuming to work across all touch points. So getting their input in the beginning helps the campaign run smoothly. Equally, guidelines are there to be interpreted, and that interpretation does differ person to person. Having that collaboration piece at various points throughout the project helps build a rationale for anything that occurs outside the box. And again, if you're part of a small team or a freelancer, find a good sounding board. A friend or a partner is just as good as a pro. Remember, everyone experiences brands all the time, and it always helps to talk about your ideas out loud. A great example of this is McDonald's. Love or hate them, during the late 90s, this food giant was slammed by European activists. Producing low quality food aimed at children that had both health and environmental costs. As a brand, they needed to answer that negativity and re-educate their audience. Red was thought to be stimulating and associated with being active. Some researchers also believe it helps jumpstart your appetite, hence why it was chosen as one of their brand colours. However, it can also mean danger, so it's not surprising that after years of bad press, they took the steps slowly to sidestep their own guidelines. Over a period of 10 years, McDonald's completely changed tact with their marketing. No more Ronald McDonald, and their visuals slowly changed too. Retaining the golden arches, they introduced a green in a bid to appear more conscious of the environment and their customers' health. As McDonald's have a global audience with more than 39,000 restaurants, it's interesting to note that it was only chosen for European restaurants. Initially, the red remained in half of all restaurants around the world, and nearly 10 years on, this remains the same. Their brand guidelines are extensive, but now have an interchangeable palette depending on country and audience. What really interests me about this particular case is their whole business model is built on structure. Wherever you go in the world, a Big Mac's a Big Mac. You expect to see and taste the same thing. So a change like this would have been huge and daunting for the team that had to execute it. Has it paid off? Whatever your personal opinion is of them, the food or their culture, they are still one of the most successful and recognisable brands in the world. A little closer to home, I've chosen an example of a client we've worked with, East Sussex Health Trust. They commissioned us to develop a campaign style for their hospital regeneration programme. Being part of the NHS, as you can imagine, their brand guidelines were fairly detailed, but we did try to push it. We created an illustration style that they hadn't used before to help communicate their message. There was some pushback. A big fear for most brands is that they'll get it wrong. And when we're talking about a brand that's more than 100 years old, it's imperative that you listen to those fears and offer your guidance. I do this by using a show, don't tell rule. We produce 2 schemes, one in the client's comfort zone and one just on the line. We always present that idea with a rationale and use excerpts from their guidelines to demonstrate where we've tweaked the rules and where we've kept to them. It develops trust between you and the client and helps open clear lines of discussion for the next stage. Their campaign was all about movement and growth and change. So shape is the only new addition we used. Everything else uses their font, their secondary and tertiary colour palettes, but it has completely transformed their look and delivers a precise campaign message. An interesting one here is that their placement guidelines say that the NHS logo should always be placed right aligned, which, as you can imagine, digitally doesn't work. When all advertising communication was in print, you can understand why this was there and is probably a rule left over from a pre-digital era. We came to a happy medium and agreed with this particular campaign that online placements would now be left aligned, but in print, it must be aligned to the right. Don't limit your own creativity. Guidelines are there to help you. If you work in-house, it can be really, really hard to find a good creative sounding board, as I talked about earlier. If you don't have a wider creative team around you to brainstorm with, I find the following really useful. Once I've read and digested the guidelines, I make notes on what assets I have and what assets I don't. When I've identified the gaps in those assets, this is my chance to be creative. If you're missing a suite of icons to represent a user journey or an additional colour palette to represent a new product or service, then produce yourself a mood board. You can do this digitally and run it past the client before spending hours creating something that could be potentially turned down. Be aware. What works for a white paper might not work for an infographic. A sales brochure may not require the same considerations as a magazine. A website is likely to need more assets than a remarketing banner. So however far you extend the brand you're working with, make sure it works in practice and it doesn't become something that causes confusion internally and loses impact externally. Like language, we don't use all of our phrases or words in one go. Everyone would think we were completely mad. We communicate for the correct moment and the correct audience. I like to think of our work like this too. Clear, concise and appropriate for the moment and the audience. Sometimes less is more. No matter how many assets a brand has, you don't need to use it all at once. Even the best brands in the world have, with the best brand guidelines, their collateral can become stale. So update. After several years, it's important to refresh your assets. Every 2 or 3 as a rule of thumb. I'm not talking about a total rebrand. Just check to see if the colours, including those important secondary and tertiary colours, are still fresh. Review whether any aspects are being overused and add some new design trends. Often updating your photos can make a huge difference. Where possible, these should be bespoke to you, but there are some great stock libraries out there, and with a little bit of work and overlays and editing tools, these can look just as impactful. It's easier on everyone if you don't create your brand guidelines that end up being a 100-slide deck. So keep it flexible with room for creativity. But if something new is added, if you've designed a new asset, add it to the guidelines as soon as possible so the rest of the team can use it where relevant. This is when you take your guideline from a book of do's and don'ts to a dictionary of assets that help you tell your brand story. So to round up, over my years of working with brands and their guidelines, I've learned it's way more about flexibility than I was ever taught in junior roles. It's about creativity, adaptation, and communicating each part of the plot that makes up each brand's individual story. So my takeaways are: read them before you start, ask questions, understand where your role fits, collaborate. Bold moves don't have to mean huge changes. Stay creative and update. Do we have any questions?
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was great. We do indeed have some questions coming through, which is great. And I've got a couple as well.
Sharing? Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so a few questions have come through. So a couple from David and another one that's come in. If you're watching now and you do have any questions, please don't be shy. We've got loads of time set aside for a good follow-up discussion on everything that Lisa's just taken us through. So please do keep them coming. So the first question that came in was from David, and he has said that he has in the past struggled to get the wider team engaged in brainstorming creative ideas. So I guess beyond the brand team. Any advice to getting their buy-in and getting that engagement beyond the brand team?
I think it's I think it depends where they fit into the project. So, for example, maybe the WOE team would struggle with that. It may not be their thing. But if they understand the client and what the end goal is, I actually think it's all about the end goal. So if you say, right, well, this is what the client needs from this particular campaign or from this piece of work, then brainstorming that suddenly becomes a bit easier. And like I said in my talk, I think working together continually, so on many different touch points throughout a project, rather than just at the beginning and then at the end, you kind of means your whole team understand that brand from start to finish, and then they're more likely to feel connected to it. They need to have a connection with their job as much as we need to have a connection with the brand, and the audience need to connect with that. So yeah, I think it's about keeping them involved as much as possible.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, and something that I've definitely learned in my career, that sometimes the big reveal is not the way to go when you're looking to engage with stakeholders. Sometimes you want to like sort of keep it to yourself and then be ready to do the big show. But actually it's much better to bring people along on the journey, make them feel heard, take those views in, which, as you say, may not always be specifically from a creative point of view, but more about your customer or how it affects their role or whatever they're working on.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. Another one that came in from David, which I think is a great point and is something that I would love to understand more and may actually tap into the behavioural psychology that you talked about at the beginning of your talk that you studied. But David's asked if there's any good resources for understanding the impact of colour palette and the feelings that they invoke. So green is associated with the environment, for example. Is there a good place to find out more, to understand that?
There's some great books out there. I think they're called Brand Brilliance. Fiona Humberston is the author. She's done a lot of them. She works generally with creatives, so people in brand, and you can do her courses. But she also works with small business owners. The courses that she does are slightly tweaked for different audiences. But what's really interesting is she's sort of taken part of it is psychology. So she's kind of used a psychology research project and then underpinned that with colour psychology and what those colours actually evoke in us as human beings. So she puts them all into seasons. So you've got a winter palette. It sounds very much more high level than she makes it sound, but it's very interesting. It's a good read, and you kind of think, oh yeah, we see this all the time. You know, a winter palette is black and dark purples, but it's also quite opulent and navy blues and high end. And she underpinned those values with that colour as well, which I found really interesting. But she's definitely worth a read.
Okay, great. So that was Brand Brilliance by Fiona Humberston.
Humberstone.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah,
I'll be checking that out. Cool. So another question that has come in is around testing. So if a brand was looking to go through a brand refresh, what's the best way that you would recommend to test that out on your target market or on the public before completely committing to the rollout?
We've done a number of ways. For the most part, brands don't necessarily want that to happen. They do want that big reveal and they want to wow their client base. But we have done it with a skincare brand, and we did actually do literally two options, did A/B testing, and that was done literally by standing on the street and asking people within that persona group that might buy this skincare, what do you think, the A or the B? And noting down how it made them feel and asking them relevant questions for the brand and why they'd buy it. The skincare brand itself was aimed at teenagers, but we actually went out and did Q&As with mums and dads that are more likely to be buying their skincare than the teenager themselves. And it really worked. When we launched it, they're still using that brand now, and that was a good 5 or 6 years ago. So I'd definitely say an A/B testing, and don't make it too complicated. So don't have a red one and a pink one. They need to be similar enough that the people you're questioning, can say what it is that resonates with them, or what they don't, or what doesn't easily.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, because I suppose particularly when A/B testing, it can be quite tempting to have two completely different things so that you get a very clear result. But I suppose you could just be seeing extra interest because it looks so different, which may wane over time.
And also, design, as we all know, is personal. It's subjective. There's no hard and fast science into making this, perfect brand or perfect design. So yes, you can do all the quality assurance first. You can work as a team. You can make sure you understand your persona. You can question your audience. You can do the A/B testing. But if you make the A/B testing so they're too different, all you're going to get is somebody's personal opinion. So actually what you really need to know is how it makes them feel.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get that if they're too opposite to one another.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I would also recommend having a panel of customers as well that you show this thing to. So I work for a brand called Bird and Blend Tea, and we have a closed group of a few hundred top customers that we call the Brew Society, who have a closed Facebook group, and they almost sort of self-serving community where they have made friends with one another, but every now and then we'll show something new that we're thinking about rolling out or tweaking to get their thoughts. And I think you're right, it's less about what do you think of this, do you like it, yes or no. It is much more about how does this make you feel, and what would you do.
It can be really hard with working with stakeholders, as I'm sure you know, if you pitch anything into a board. And actually we had that exact with the East Sussex Hospital Trust with that campaign. When you're sending something to a board to be reviewed, you don't want their personal opinion. You want them to be objective, which is very hard sometimes. I love that idea of having, and I love the name as well, the Brew Collective. Is that what you said?
Brew Society. Yeah.
The Brew Society. I love it. Yeah. I mean, that's great to be able to, and for them to actually be able to be objective about it, because they're not stakeholders. They don't have that key role where their decisions mean something.
Yeah.
It's more about them being objective on the work that you're delivering.
Yeah, it's a great way to build close relationships with those customers as well, because they really feel like, well, they become part of the extension of the team almost, which is brilliant for us and great for them as well.
Yeah, amazing.
Great. So another question that came in was around sort of tips on creating brand guidelines, and I had a couple of questions that I might add to this as well to talk quite generally around the topic. So I guess overall tips on getting started with brand guidelines, but the question that I had as well was whether you would have different versions for different audiences. So whether you would have, a very technical one for your designer, or a more slimmed down version for other non-marketing teams who you just want to get straight to the heart of either the values piece or, these are the colors, and just keeping it more like on a need to know basis, I suppose, for some things.
I think that should be done. I don't think it always is. I think, like I said, I've seen everything from here's the logo and here's the colours, this is my brand guidelines, which is not really much to go with, to 100-page documents. And in the 100-page documents, you can have placement guides. And this is a real life example that, you know, mathematically beyond, like, the mind boggles. So I think you have to think about what that part of the marketing process, what that person in your team is going to use those guidelines for. I think to a point there should be an overarching brand. So like I said, everyone in the team should understand that brand enough to be able to do their job well and feel invested in their job and they're part of that brand. But there's no sense in sending a placement guide to someone in the SEO department, because what are they going to do with it? They're unlikely to use it. And likewise, there's probably no point in them reading their tone of voice guideline, unless it's a wider project. So yes, I do. I think that we should break it down into almost departments, and that they should be sent out as closed PDFs to the relevant people. But the whole document should be kept on file so it can be referred to if needed.
So anyone can access the sort of master version, and then there's maybe breakable versions. Yeah. Any other tips for just getting started with putting together a brand guide? Any templates out there maybe?
I don't know of any templates. We tend to do ours from scratch. I'm sure there must be some out there somewhere. But what I would say is the most important things are your colours, and obviously your logo and how that is used, and then your fonts. So all of those three things make up the smallest type of brand guideline you can have. And when it comes to colours, you need to have them all in there. So it's important that you have your RGB, your CMYK, your Pantone, but also things like paint colours are becoming more and more important. If it's called a RAL code, which is something I've learned about just recently with helping a client rebrand. They wanted to paint all the outside of their buildings. Now, how can we possibly guarantee in ink how that paint is going to look? So we spent quite a lot of time researching how we can get a paint made for them. So I think it's even thinking about those details. Where is this brand going? How is it being used? So I'd say colour, font, logo, they're the most important things to start with.
Yeah, and then thinking really specifically about your brand so that it becomes less about, well, here's what a brand guideline should be, and more about, well, how are we going to use it? What are the nuances to what our team are going to need to know?
Exactly, and it's a bit, to template brand guidelines almost impossible, because we're saying that brands are unique and special and different between every brand, and then we're saying we'll put it in a template and that's all you should need. And actually it doesn't work like that. So I think every brand is individual, so think about the guidelines individually too.
Yeah, that's great advice. Cool. A few more questions that have come in, which is great. So we've got someone who said that they are currently interning for a company and they are the sole marketing person on the team. So what would your advice be for the best approach for them to building the brand image and branding, given that they don't have a designer on the team and they are that sole marketer? Where do you start?
Okay, well, my first question is, can you design? You know, is that part of your remit, or is that part of your skill set? If you can, you're the sole marketer in-house. They don't have a brand already, or are you rebranding? So I'd have a million questions. I almost want to talk to this person. But I think the first thing I'd say is, okay, look at what this company needs. Look at the audience first, then look at the physicality of that. So what do you need to look like? If you're on your own, I think, especially in-house, I think it can be harder. I think there's so much taken for granted in being able to brainstorm and bounce ideas around with other people. And I think, you know, since COVID, that's been proven all the more. And we've used things like Zoom to still be able to make that connection so we can share our ideas. I think I said in my talk, don't be afraid to share your ideas with people that aren't in marketing or that aren't in brand or that know nothing about it. Because I think we forget as marketeers that everybody sees brand every single day of the week, every single touch point, every waking moment. We are constantly bombarded with brand. So everyone opinions count. So use them. See what other people have got to say. Ask them.
That's great advice. I mean, I think I learn more and more that a lot of marketing is actually just common sense, really, isn't it?
Don't tell anyone.
So yeah,
it's not magic.
Yeah, bouncing around with your customer service team who are talking to your customers every day. You know, they are part of your brand team, whether it's officially, you know, considered marketing or not. So yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. And then there was a follow-up question to the question that we've just looked at, which was how to communicate to your boss the things that do need to change that come out of that you know, look that you've been doing at the brand, and how to communicate that without causing offense to something that has perhaps been there since day one, or that boss may have been responsible for.
Yeah, that's hard. It's not easy. There's no hard and fast rule, and obviously individual personalities play a huge part in that as well. But what I would say is, you know, small changes are good, and people are usually receptive to small changes, but give a rationale. Always have a reason behind why you think something should change. So if you really want to create change where you're working, then take the extra time and build that mood board and put your, like I said, take the brand guidelines and say, here you go, this is where I've stuck to the rules, but this is where I'm outside of the line, but look at the difference it can make. So sell it to them. You know, part of our job as marketeers is sales after all, you know, so sell that to your boss and let me know how it goes.
Yeah, I really loved your idea within your talk of presenting the two options. One where you're within the guide and it's, you know, pretty much how you imagine something would come out, but then also showing the further, you know, the move on. And I guess sometimes you may then end up somewhere in the middle, which is
majority. Actually, most of the time we're somewhere in between what the client thinks they want and what we would really like to do. And I think that's exactly how it should be. You know, that especially brands that have, like the NHS, you know, 100 years old or more, you can't just take that brand guideline, throw it out the window and start again. It doesn't work like that. But we still have to try and, you know, move them on and allow them to realize that actually evolving the brand is not a bad thing. You're not changing it, you're just moving it on to the next phase. And
then coming at that with maybe some customer research that you've already done, even if it's just a mini focus group with a handful of customers, that leading with a bit of customer insight will always be good for buy-in as well. Great. A few more. So Elliot has asked, how far should your brand represent your company's values and mission? Or is there a danger a brand can become too internally focused rather than focused on connecting to customers?
Yes, as especially with some of, I think especially with software. I see this a lot with software. Software companies run by very, very intelligent people. Very, very intelligent people work in those software companies, and they become fixated on what their software does and how it performs. And actually they forget how it makes the person that's using the software feel. Everything about brand and design really, it goes back to human beings and how it makes you feel. When you're using something, buying something, eating something, it's all done on emotion and reaction. So I think there is a danger that you become too internally focused, and you're a software company, you want to show screenshots of your software. Doesn't mean anything to anybody on the outside. So that's when, yes, you need to think about actually, well, where are the people here, and how is what we're selling going to affect their lives?
Yeah, so bringing out those values, bringing out that mission, making sure that has been fully thought through and communicated.
Yeah, and sometimes I think just the logo and the fonts and the color palettes isn't enough to represent those. And that's where you grow those brand guidelines. That's where you grow those assets, by adding in various other things, whatever that might be, dependent on the brand, that help communicate those values.
Yeah. Great. And then final question from Meg, who said, really great talk. Any tips you have for creating a comms toolkit to accompany brand guidelines intended for partners to be able to co-brand when doing marketing promotions or partnerships, which is a great question.
That is a great question. We're working on something actually at the moment that kind of fits this question. I think often working with visuals and then pairing that with the comms that comes alongside, and I hope I've got this question right, I hope I'm understanding this right, you can have really great visuals and then or really great headlines, and then the two things just don't work together. So I think, again, that is my top tip, is really about collaboration and about communication, because whoever you're working with, whether that be the client or internal, you need to make sure that you're all on the same page and that you are seeing the brand through the same set of eyes. Because if you're seeing it through the same set of eyes, whatever you create is going to connect and deliver a better outcome. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, so it's, creating any additional bits to go alongside the brand guidelines. So I guess just making sure also that you have, your high quality photography or logos and clear colors and everything that you want to be used.
Yeah, and again, photography is such a difficult one. Yes, as a creative, I would much rather everyone went and got a photographer and had a bespoke shoot every time they wanted to do anything, because it's just so much easier. For a start, either myself or someone on our team can be there to curate that particular thing for the campaign, but that's not always possible, and it's not always within the budget. But when it is, and when it isn't, I think photographs are so important. Think about what they are, and if they're getting used every 5 minutes, that's time to refresh them and change for something else. Yeah,
definitely. I would also say, when working with a partner, and something that I've grown in confidence in myself over my career, is if an asset has been created that's using your branding, don't be embarrassed or shy if you're not happy with it. Like, if it's not within brand guidelines, or it's got like a weird line on it, just say, like, it's not personal, and you've got to maintain your brand standards. So being confident to be able to say, like, I can't sign that off is a good skill to learn as well, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. We've got one more question that's just come in, and then I will let you go. So I'm just going to read it through. So from Khalid, who said, I'm joining as a business development manager to a local SME providing services to private healthcare consultants nationally. So they have developed a new SW product. I actually don't know what SW means, but
I don't know either. Maybe
yeah, I'll read through the rest, but maybe if this question came from you, if you wouldn't mind just following up. So I will be marketing and selling this product within 2 months of me joining, which is a big direction change for the company. What would your advice be? Software. Yeah. What would your advice be for the brand of this software product? So I guess navigating a pivot in a brand.
If I've got this right, it sounds like they don't currently sell software. They're selling it to healthcare professionals, into healthcare organisations. Is that right? I think that's right.
Yeah, services to private healthcare consultants. Yeah.
So software is always a tricky one. Generally in-house, like I said, they want to sell the software rather than the end result. And my first piece of advice would be sell the end result. What is going to make that consultant's life better? How is that software going to make his job easier, or make his processes more streamlined, or know where he's working next if he's a consultant and he's all over the country? Whatever that software is doing, sell the benefits of it, not what it does. From a brand perspective, I think it's still okay to to look techie, you don't have to mirror healthcare, and you don't have to mirror a lifestyle brand just because you're selling to people. But I think just remember the people and how that makes them feel.
Yeah, great advice. B2B, B2C, we're all human, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly. Doesn't matter. It's still selling to a human.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, on that note, thank you so much, Lisa. We've covered so much ground there and some brilliant questions as well, which has been great to see. Thank you so much for your time. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. Great. We'll catch up soon then.
Yeah. Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, Lisa. And now it's time to say hello to James, who I can see waiting in the wings there. Hello.
Hiya. Well done, Lise. That was great.
Yeah, very good. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, all good, thank you. So we are going to do a fireside chat, which means that we've got half an hour or so to chat through a bit more about you and your experience and a few things that you want to share, and then plenty of time for Q&A like we've just done with Lisa as well. So yeah, thanks very much for coming along today. And do you want to kick off by, I guess, just introducing yourself and telling us a bit more about your background?
Yeah, sure. I'll just do the last 8 years, otherwise it will take the half hour and be quite dull. So yeah, I co-founded Cobb Digital about 8.5 years ago after kind of series of sales and marketing roles from uni. My first of which was Car Phone Warehouse, which was an education in sales, but certainly. So yeah, set up Cobb Digital about 8 years ago. We focused primarily on the healthcare market initially because I'd worked within that sector, and then we grew organically for a couple of years, took on a couple of recruits, kind of grew to a team of 4 or 5, so still a pretty micro business. And then an agency I had a lot of respect for came up for sale, Leapfrog, and so Rosie Freshwater that set that up, she'd built a brilliant business and had focused very much on the retail side of clients, and it was something I was interested in getting into. Obviously, more and more money being spent online, and we didn't necessarily have the expertise on the retail side at that point. So Rosie and I came to an agreement on that, and all of her team came across to work for me as part of that, which was brilliant. And you know, good few of them are still with me as well, which is great. And they brought, if I'm honest, it wasn't just, I kind of did that for the clients, but it was actually the staff and the processes that were the better part. So Sue, who heads up our SEO website development, she's just probably the best in the market. And, you know, she's got 15 years of experience. She's just brilliant. So, you know, having those kind of senior people that came across as part of it really elevated everyone in the team as well, and gave us a good foundation to grow. And then skipping forward to recently, we did everything once the brand and logo and everything had been, and even the website had been developed. We then marketed it, you know, either through sales or growing inquiries or whatever, but we didn't do any of the brand development or the web design. We outsourced that to Lisa and her old company, Spoken. So Lisa and I have been speaking for years about how we can tie that up more formally. And then pre-COVID, everything was ready, and then obviously we were going to launch, I think, the 1st of April or something. Lisa might correct me on that, but I know, I think I was warned against April Fool's Day at some point in April, and obviously March was when everything went a bit crazy. So we delayed for a year. Really interestingly, listening to Lisa, she did exactly that branding job on me. So there was quite an out there design, which I didn't really like. And then there was the one that we've got, which every time I look at the website, I still absolutely love, and just I'm really proud that that's something that's got our name on it. And so we brought across Lisa and her team, and now we do everything from concept of a brand all the way through to, you know, tens of thousands of pounds worth of per month of Google spend, and anything in between. So it's been really cool.
Yeah, great. Quite a roller coaster of the last year or so for you then.
Yeah, definitely.
You talked a lot about teams there and team integration and the people side of things actually being the bit that you're, I guess, most proud of. So it would be good to hear more about team structure and how you've arrived at that.
Yeah, so I mean, there's only really 2 things I'm good at. One is recruitment and the second is sales. And now Lisa does all the sales, and I'm not allowed to recruit anyone, so that's good. So I don't really know what I do, but the recruitment has always been something that we've done well. We've had by and large very, very good people work for us, and there's a lot of my team that have been with me over 6 years, which in a city that is basically every other person you meet is digital marketing. It's been good to keep that kind of loyalty and retention. When I started, there was a person I'd worked with before at Pure 360. I think pretty much everyone that works in Brighton at some point has worked for Pure 360. But I worked with him and I knew him and I trusted him. So I brought him across really early on, and he kind of headed up all of the strategy and delivery, and he's still with me now. And then I brought on, I didn't really know, if I'm completely honest, which direction I wanted to go in. So I brought in some generalist marketeers, and we had a room not much bigger than the room I'm in now for 4 of us, and we all did bits of everything. Then there was a seismic shift when I took across Leapfrog, that they had paid media experts, SEO experts, account managers, and I changed the business overnight. And that was definitely one of the best decisions I've made. So since then, I've only ever employed out and out experts. I have taken on grads along the way and interns that have then become full-timers. So although I would always say out and out experts, they at least had to show that that was the area they wanted to go into. So our most recent paid media grad, when I spoke to him, paid media was all he wanted to do. So although, we're training them up to be an expert, there has to be that kind of interest in the sector they're going into. And I think, some of my mates that run agencies or work in senior places, some of the micro level of kind of niche skills people are going into now, I think it's really important to get people that care about what they do and are willing to kind of go down the expertise route, because then obviously that gives clients more of a kind of faith that I'm buying into a team of experts rather than someone that knows about as much of paid media or social or email as I do. So that's been really important. And then bringing across Lisa and her team recently, I've really kind of thought about where everyone sits within the team. So I mentioned before Christian, but Christian and Lisa are now really helping drive the business on. And then I've got a really strong set of managers underneath them. And then the kind of the juniors or the people that have been with me for a few years, we always hire based on kind of culture and hunger rather than CV. And I don't even know the last time I looked at education on someone's CV, to be honest.
That's really interesting. On that point, and also what you were saying about a grad or someone first starting out in their career, any tips then for what would catch your eye if someone, they think that they want to go into SEO or PPC, for example, but just haven't got the experience yet? How can they show you that that's what their passion is, or what they're looking to get into?
It's funny because I think there's 2 things that have really stood out in the last year or so. One is, if you're a marketer, you should be able to write, like regardless of whether you're paid media, email, SEO, whatever, you should be able to write. It's, like Lisa said a number of times, it's telling a story. And every single time I get a well-crafted cover letter. I mean, I go back to everyone that applies. We get, at the minute, sadly, obviously quite a few people have lost jobs over the last year. So we get more prospective CVs than we've ever had. But I will always reply to everyone that emails in, and either forward them to someone who I think may be looking, given, if they give their approval or whatever. But the thing that always sticks in my mind is a well-crafted cover letter. And it's so easy, like, I know they're playing the game. They've looked at our case studies. They've referenced a couple of people we've worked with. They've maybe gone on LinkedIn. But with the wealth of information we can get now, if you're not using that to your advantage, that says to me you're not that fast and you're just scattergunning your CV. So if they reference a client we've worked with, if they put something, the ones that always make me excited are they've referenced something about our ethos or our team, or, love that, because obviously then they've taken time to think about what we do. And then, Lisa mentioned as well, a certain aspect of it has to be selling. So if there's the reason you need me is X, Y, Z, then, again, we've got 3 of our team now that were grads that we've trained up. And all of them did that with a really strong cover letter. All of them kind of chased me if they hadn't heard from me from the follow-up from a week. I think there's, that is something to do. Shows hunger, doesn't take long. And then when you come to interview, I think, again, you don't have to make up that you've got loads of experience, but with the world that we live in, there are so many free courses. So a lot of the people that apply now have done, you know, the Google Academy or Hootsuite or accreditation, or, you know, any of those kind of things that show to me actually you're making an investment into your own career. So, you know, you're going to add something to the team as well.
Lots of really brilliant tangibles. I'm sure there's lots of people making lots of notes right now, but yeah, show you care.
Exactly.
Isn't it? Yeah. And what about business owners who are looking out to build out their team? So it sounds like something you've obviously done quite a lot of over the last few years. You know, what's the first step to take if you don't even know where to begin?
So there's a few actually I've got on this one. The first thing I would always start with, and it took me a while, is I think we get really hung up on job titles. And Lisa mentioned in there, initially we gave her business development director, and now she's head of brand development, which is far more suited to what she does. So I think, first of all, don't think about, you know, oh, we need an SEO expert or we need an account manager. Ignore that. Ignore the job title and make a list of either the skills you're lacking or where the work is kind of only just being propped up. Make a list of all of the things that you need that person to do. And then that will help inform actually who you need. And make the job description. Don't just copy and paste from the last one that I see loads. Actually think about, these are the skills we need. Do you need Excel sheet? You know, I see that in every job description. Do you really need that? Like, is that the primary, second or third bullet point? Probably not. But do you need interesting data and, like, you know, ability to craft a sentence? So I'd start with that. Then the second thing, which was a piece of advice I was given probably 12 years ago, is always hire someone more intelligent than you, which has been a piece of piss over that 12 years, to be honest. So that's a good one to do. And then the final one, someone told me recently, is when you're a growing business, you're always too late to hire and too late to fire. So I think, you know, really thinking about where are the gaps going to be, doing some really effective forecasting of, you know, if we carry on with this rate of sales, we're going to need an ops director, we're going to need an account manager, whatever it is, and scope out what that person does and get those ads before you're at breaking point. And then if you do make a bad decision, and you know, I think we have to remember this is a two-way thing. They might not think that they're a good fit with us afterwards or whatever. Is have those difficult conversations early on rather than tolerating and potentially, you know, having wider issues.
Yeah, so keep your eye on what's going on. Don't be too generic. A little bit like Lisa's advice around the brand guidelines as well. You know, there isn't a one size fits all. It's got to be right for your team and your culture and all the rest.
Definitely.
Of it. Yeah, great. And what about someone who's at the beginning of their career or looking to make the hop from brand side into agency? What advice would you give them on how to break into the agency world?
I mean, working in an agency, you need to be able to spin a load of plates. I think whilst I said there's a lot of people that have been with me over 5 years, it's not for everyone, because you have to dip in and out of projects. So you need to be really good at multitasking. You also need to be able to, because none of my managers, and myself included, are micromanagers. We'd rather employ people we trust and let them crack on. So that means you need to have a certain kind of work ethic and, you know, being able to kind of see something through from start to finish. So that's important. I think the ability to show that you can work on a number of projects at one go. And again, I know it's kind of a theme, but showing that you care. If you're looking to move across to an agency, find out about the types of clients that they work with, and look at what makes them tick and look at how they are. We've been working on our own kind of, you know, if I'm completely honest, every business plan I've put together has been like the back of a mouse mat, a kind of loose target. But because we've had such a period of growth, I've actually got, you know, quite a detailed plan for the next year or two. And that really started with the types of clients we want to work with, the things that we want to be known for. And I think with agencies, a good agency, you know, spreads the kind of key messages and the selling points of their clients more than their own. And so, you know, getting to grips with the clients before an interview would be a really key one.
Yeah.
I think the final bit as well is being particularly for the team I've got now. They always take the mickey out of me because every Christmas I say it's the best team we've ever had, but it generally is the best team we've had. And where they're brilliant is all of the heads of their departments are quite like not defensive, but they're quite, you know, if a client's got £10,000, well, paid media needs it, no SEO needs it, no email. They're very happy to fight their corner, but at the same time, there's no ego. They're super collaborative. So, you know, if Chloe loses that fight and the money isn't going into paid media, it's going into email, you know, she won't sulk. She'll then help email and do that. So I think the ability to kind of be confident in your decisions and be proactive in that, but equally, you know, working collaboratively. And again, you know, doing that over Zoom for the last year or so has been a challenge. Particularly, you know, a lot of mine are quite friendly over the years and enjoy seeing each other. So trying to create those kind of collaborative discussions on there has taken some curation, but just as we're coming out of it, I think we've smashed it now.
Yeah, it's a challenge, isn't it? Are you back in the office now or going for a kind of hybrid type route?
Yeah, I've got two issues there. So first of all, I've changed the policy, so we're always going to be 100% flexible. I'm not going to do one of those. You've got to do 2 days in the office, 3 days off. I just don't. I don't like the narrative that sets, if I'm honest. But I know some companies do because, yeah, whatever. But I've made it completely flexible, completely up to the team what they do. As long as you're hitting deadlines and you're, you know, contributing and you're available if we need like a client day, it's completely up to you. The challenges I've got, one is I now have 21 staff and I've got 16 desks. So that's going to be fun if we ever have a full day. The second thing I have is, you know, I think those people that are probably never going to come into the office, keeping them and making sure they're feeling engaged. Because, you know, having half of the room in and delivering and talk to them and then half dialing in from Zoom is a skill set we haven't grown up with. So it does definitely take some thinking about. But it can be done.
Yeah, it is really, really challenging. We found the same. We've been working out of a relatively small space in Brighton and now thinking like, what are we going to do when everyone comes back in?
Yeah, I think I'm going to keep the there's a couple of my staff that are either working really small flats with a partner or, you know, their home isn't conducive to working, so they've been coming in, and I think that will just expand a bit. I was speaking to someone yesterday, a bit archaic. He was thinking come September everyone's going to be in the office full time. I just can't see it.
Yeah, no, it's open. It's shown us what's possible, isn't it?
If nothing else, days like today, I had 3 washes washed and dried by 11 o'clock. Like, you can't put a value on that.
Literally get so much washing done. I'm looking at my washing right now.
Yeah.
Cool. So you talked about one of your principles has been to sort of put your client first above the I guess the agency, not brand to some extent, but putting them at the heart of the way that you talk about your business. So, you know, the agency market is incredibly competitive, and as a brand marketer, there's, you know, I can speak to the fact that there's so much choice out there and everyone sometimes feels like they're telling you the same thing. So how have you been able to differentiate Fox&Bear within the market?
Yeah, so I mean, there's 2 things, and we'll come on to storytelling in a bit, but there's 2 things that I think we do really, really well. And I think, interestingly, the only time I'll ever disagree with Lisa is that when she said that we're all marketers. I think everyone's got an opinion on marketing. I don't think everyone is a marketeer. And I think it's I'd say it's probably my biggest frustration is if you work in finance, you've got an opinion on logo and branding, but that doesn't mean you're right on that because you're not our target audience. Like, I wouldn't go into a meeting with a CFO and say, all those figures are wrong because it's not my bag. So I do think sometimes that can be a frustration when everyone is an expert. So every client we've ever had has a gut feel of what they think a campaign should be. And we strip that right back and start with data. So let data do the talking. You know, where are your audience? Where do they hang out? What, how many of them are responding to the adverts we're putting out? You know, which one of the variants that we put out is getting a better click-through rate? All of that kind of stuff. You can't argue with those facts and figures. So start with that. But by itself, data is meaningless. So, you know, having a powerful narrative around that, making sure you understand who you're talking to and crafting a narrative that's going to fit around that is where it works well. And I think practically in terms of Fox&Bear, you know, touch wood, since we've launched Fox&Bear, we've never had more inbound inquiries, which I think is testament to the brilliant job Lisa's done with the branding. I think it looks and feels great. I think we've honed what we do and who we are. I think the team are brilliant. So I think that spreads and like you would expect, a lot of our work is referral, or we tend to build brilliant relationships with, you know, a marketing director or CMO, and if they move role, they often take us with them. So where that's happened, we sometimes end up with two, because the incumbent, the company they're working with wants to keep us as consistency, and the new person takes us across, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
And then I think, I listened to the things that people didn't like about agency. So being too rigid with their offering. So we're completely results focused. So if you've started with us on paid and actually paid media isn't right for you, there won't be a penalty moving across to SEO. We'll just do that because that's what's best for you. Mm-hmm. Equally, all our reporting highlights what hasn't worked just as much as what has. We don't hide behind that. So I think all of that together is why we're doing okay at the minute.
Yeah, that flexibility is again, as a brand marketer, knowing that you would have the ability to move across into the different areas that you offer, that's quite cool, because one of the fears is always that you're kind of locked in and it might not work out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we where we're best is where people view us as an extension of their team, rather than I'm going to call Fox&Bear and get an update on my paid media. Some of my clients, there's hospital I've worked with for years, that they actually get me involved in their interviewing because they like a second opinion. So I'll sit in their interview panel, or if they've got an issue with their team, a couple of my clients will call me and see what I would do, which I think that's probably one of the most job satisfactions I get, because it shows that we've done a brilliant job at feeling as part of their team rather than just an outsourced supplier.
Yeah, that's great. I've just seen a few questions pop up actually, so I'm going to jump in. So someone has said, this is a comment actually, great to hear that you reply to everyone who applies for a job. So many don't, so that has put me off cover letters, but I will start again. So that's great. And then someone has also said, great story in regards to how you got to where you are now and the process that you went through. And how would you decide between investing in a new market or making an acquisition to enter the market? Which is a great question.
Yeah, that is an interesting one. Yeah, my team always rings me because it's the answer I give all the time. But what are you trying to achieve? Do you want to work for yourself? Do you want to grow slowly? Are you risk averse? I would ask yourself all of these questions. I was talking to Lisa yesterday, actually. 4 or 5 years ago, if I'm honest, my ego was starting to not quite fit inside this room, and I had, I wanted to get a helicopter pilot's license to sit alongside, and I wanted and then I think COVID was really good for just actually a little bit more than I've got now. And so that knowing what you want from life, I think, is a really good place to start with any of that ambition, because then you can make decisions based on that. So I would start with what you want from life, small question. But really sit with, do you want to be sitting at the top of a business with 500 people, or would you rather have a lifestyle business with 10 people? And there isn't a right or wrong. There's just what makes you tick. And then I would look at the people, if there's someone in the market already doing it brilliantly, but they've got an MD or a CEO that actually would like to trial something else, well, then that makes a great idea for an acquisition. If you think there's no good players in the market at the moment and you've got a different way of doing it and the cost of entry to that market is minimal because you don't have to buy tech and equipment, then I'd go alone and build out that niche.
Okay. Cool. Just looking at the other questions. So the agencies that we've worked with have always been found through recommendation, which you mentioned too. If I wanted to go alone but lack sales skills, is it better I find a partner who has this skill set or can bring customers with them? So I think that might be a follow-up question to entering the market. Do I go it alone or do I partner up with someone, I guess?
Okay, if I wanted to go alone but lack sales skills. Okay. So in terms of, partnering with someone that could bring sales in? Yeah, I definitely think so. I think in terms of recommendations, again, at the beginning, I was quite lucky. So I'd finished working for the Montefiore Hospital in Hove, and I loved that, part of a 3-person team at the beginning, and, took ostensibly a sales and marketing job and ended up choosing things like the color of curtains and things. So it was a real learning curve. But the first client I got on the back of that was, the NHS, which obviously was a key one to help revenue. But then after that started to slow down, there were a couple of clients I really wanted to work with that I reached out and did some pro bono work for. So again, if you're confident in what you can do but lack sales skills, and that recommendations are going to be something, I would reach out to a couple of really either target audiences that you think, if I got a recommendation off you, this is really going to help me, or a charity that you care about. I still do quite a lot of pro bono work for smaller charities. And if you think that could give you a case study, or could just, often if you're at the beginning, you want to practice that actually what you're giving someone is of value. So by working with a charity and saying, what is it you need? So I've got some work I'm doing tomorrow. They want some a bit of a strategy around their email marketing. So if you were at the beginning of doing that, you could say, what is it you need to achieve from this strategy? Let's work on it together. I'm not going to charge you any money, but if you could do me a referral or a case study, obviously then there's something in that for both people. They'll be happy. And if you don't want to go down the charity route, everyone's had some difficult times in terms of revenue. So there might be a client in your target audience that would lap up half a day of pro bono work, and would then mean that you can get that recommendation.
Yeah, that's great advice for starting out. So thinking about, I guess, more innovative ways to start casting the net out and getting some things under your belt.
And again, going back to the cover letter, I've won work, so it's so old school, but one of my favorite clients I worked with years ago, they had a brilliant article in The Guardian about, they were I hate the word, but they were a real disruptor. They had a really new way of doing something. And there was a brilliant write-up in the Guardian. And she told me after I won the work, loads of people saw it and sent her a message saying, you need, digital, you need this. But they hadn't actually read the article. They'd just seen the headline and thought, oh, they're obviously got money, let's go for it. Where, I mean, we're coming on to the final bit, but I'm a massive history nerd, and she'd referenced a couple of times within the article about things we can learn from history. So I picked them up and put them in the cover letter I sent to her, and I sent her some of her competitors and things that I thought they'd done well. And so I did that as the prospect email. I'd love to work with you, love the article, these are some things I agree with, was interested to hear you say that. So again, if you're building up sales, that's a really good way. Identify 10 clients you'd really like to work with and craft a really well written email.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that links back to what Lisa was talking about as well, whether it's B2B or B2C, ultimately you're dealing with a human. And I always think about that during my time as an email marketer. If I wouldn't personally sit down in my inbox and write this message to a customer and send it to them from me, like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Marketing message, like, you're still talking to a human. If you wouldn't approach that potential client on the street and say what you're going to put in an email.
Yeah. I totally agree. Yeah. It's interesting. I know the B2B, B2C thing's always interested me, because you're still an individual who's clicking, that advert, or, it still has to, we can go on to Aristotle in a bit, but his triangle of how to make an argument persuasive, you need an emotional hook, you need data, and you need some you need to show that the business they're going to work with aligns with your ethics. If you have all three of those things, you're going to respond to it. And that doesn't matter if you're a buyer manager at Staples or working for a lovely tea company in Brighton. You're still an individual who's going to click on that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, one more quick question before I promise we can talk about the ancient Greeks, which is, so you talked about data, and any tools, books, courses that you recommend to develop more data skills, basically?
Yeah, nice question. So there's two things I would say. One, we've never lived in a better time to get access to free courses. So if you've got an interest, one of my PPC, I think Lisa's probably logged off by now, bored of my voice, but one of my favorite ever employees, she used to use her time at the gym to watch YouTube videos about Google paid ads. And we only ever found it out because someone was at the gym and found it. And like, that is just everything to me. The fact that she loves her career so much, she's not even going to let treadmill time be downtime. She's going to learn. So we're always interested when clients use anything apart from Google Analytics. So we're yet to be convinced by any of the large paid versions. Google Analytics should be the start and finish of data. So any courses that are available that will upskill you on that is where I would start. The Google Academy is really good. And then you've got loads of free resources that you can do within that. So if you're interested in data, I would definitely start with that. However we feel about the big tech giants, which but it's a good place to start.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think knowing Google Analytics is just such an essential for a marketer, and it also means that pretty much any job that you go into, you can kind of hit the ground running because everyone's using Google Analytics. So
exactly,
you know where to look. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
All right, great. So James is a TEDx speaker and did a TEDx talk around what the ancient Greeks can teach us about digital marketing, which you can watch on YouTube and highly recommend. So I just wanted to finish off by letting you talk about your favorite subject and ask, what can we learn from the ancient Greeks about digital marketing?
Yeah, I'm trying to get, a friend of mine saw the advert for this, and I don't know if you watch Peep Show, but Mark Corrigan did Business Secrets of the Pharaoh, so I'll keep getting rinsed for that because it's not far off it, and I don't think Mark Corrigan's who anyone aspires to be. But I did archaeology at uni, and it's taken me sort of 15 years since to then actually use it for any kind of part of my career. But yeah, I've got hopefully I've got another one of those talks coming out, and I've gone a bit more into a specific niche. But the thing for me, the reason why I love the ancient Greeks, if you read any book about why Homo sapiens succeeded and Neanderthal or anything else didn't, the main thing really is that we're brilliant at gossiping and we're brilliant at telling stories. And I don't think there was ever any better than the Greeks. So, I think what's been really useful and really interesting, and Lisa's mentioned, brands like McDonald's, like, it's crap food that is not well put together or good for you, but we feel better about it because now they're using green and they're telling a story about how they care. So, I think every good marketing goes back to telling an effective story, which the more and more, I've got back into the Greeks, it's exactly what they did. And I think that what they did really well that we can take into a digital age is being able to tell stories. So this was, if we look at Homer, we didn't write things down then. These were stories that were told around a campfire. You'd have a traveling person come to your town, he'd tell you a story, you'd all know it, you'd join in, the kids would be there, you'd have a beer, you'd have some barbecue food, and it was a great way to bring you all together around a fire. But, we would need to be able to have our attention brought to that story. So, when Homer would introduce a new character, and all of his books is just a plethora of different characters, and probably most of us don't know an Agamemnon or a Nestor or an Odysseus, but whenever he introduced a character, he'd use like just a really short sentence before it. So the quick-witted Odysseus or the quick to anger Agamemnon. And so you would immediately think, I know someone who's angry, I know someone that's a bit cheeky, I know someone who's a bit egotistical. So you then can identify with Achilles, and you can identify with Zeus or whoever you want, rather than it being this kind of crazy mythical creature that you're never going to identify with. So I think being able to tell quick stories, particularly in a time when our attention is being dragged all over, we need to have a look at that. I think the second thing that particularly Homer did really well, and again, when Lisa's talking about brand, it was something she referenced, was really knowing your target audience. There were different versions of his story depending where he was going, but he knew who his audience was. And I think when we do like a brand workshop, or we're looking into identifying an audience, it's too often people will say, right, we know the bulk of our audience are 35 to 50-year-old females who live in West London and buy from John Lewis. But that isn't a person. So we sit down and we think, okay, what does Catherine Loftus like? What what political movements is she interested in? And we actually do them on pen and paper, because some of the old school stuff still works. We'll write their name and we'll put words and feelings and emotions behind that person. When you've done that, you're far more able to get into their mindset and think about crafting a story that's going to make that person resonate, rather than just a person who ticks this box and is likely to buy this product. The kind of final bit I'll say, because I'm sitting on as 5 to 2, if you need storytelling advice, the way Homer told a story was the best way and won't ever end. So start in the middle of the story. No one gives a crap about once upon a time. Start in the middle, get us hooked. So whatever that is, buying this product will give you X, or case study, start it in the middle of the story. Second, use emotion, particularly now we're far more open. We're talking about emotions, rightfully so. We're far more open about talking about how we're feeling, whether that's mental health, whether that's anxiety, whatever it is. Use emotion, and that can be, we mentioned about B2B. Still, human is going to be clicking on that. So use humor, use whatever emotion is reflective of your brand. And then the final thing that Homer was brilliant at, and I certainly have practiced, is repeat yourself. Tell them what you're going to tell them it, and tell them what you told them, because people need to be told things 3 times. So You know, if we look at LinkedIn, for instance, you know, 1 in 100 of our own followers will see the content we put out. So if we do the same content 3 times, we've increased our chances of them seeing that by 3-fold. So don't be afraid to repeat the same messaging, because people need to see consistency and need to see regular content from you to stand out.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And you can, as I mentioned, you can find James's talk on YouTube, and sounds like you've got another one coming up as well. So definitely look out for that. Thank you so much for your time. Sorry if there are any questions that we didn't get to, but we have run out of time. But you can find both James and Lisa on LinkedIn, and also do check out their agency Fox&Bear if you like what you've heard and you think you might need some of the support that they can offer. And James, thank you so much for your time, and catch up soon.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye for now. All right, so that brings us to the end of this edition of Marketing Talk. Thank you so much for coming along. I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, feedback very appreciated. So if you want to drop me, Steve, or anyone from the team at Silicon Brighton a line about what you thought of the event, or if you're interested in speaking at an upcoming one, would love to hear from you. If you want to zap this QR code, that will take you through to the Silicon Brighton Hub, which is a really brilliant piece of kit that the team there have put together, which is sort of forum style, where you can connect with others within the Brighton community and beyond. There's a marketing talk area there where we always put the recordings and the slides from our events, and you can chat to other people who came along. So definitely encourage you to check that out. We will also share the date for the next event there and on LinkedIn, so do keep your eyes peeled. And yeah, that's it for today. So thanks so much again for coming. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I also want to give a massive shout out to Sean, who is from Event 7, who works behind the scenes at every single one of these events, keeping us running smoothly and the tech working. Big shout out to you, Sean. And thank you so much, everyone. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.